By now, we've established one thing. Playing a lot of Premier League games does not automatically mean that you were good at them. Welcome back to How Did They Play? The podcast where reputations don't get protected, careers get revisited, and nostalgia is treated as evidence, not an excuse. Today, it's just me and Connor because of Adam's connectivity issues and Jack being unavailable. So it's just me and Connor. Today, we're going to give our two players, of which one will join the LQQ or not. The last one was a long one, so hopefully you enjoyed that one and you know who got in episode 6. But as we go into episode 7, let's see who will join our infamous League of Questionable Quality. So I'm going to go first. I've had spun on the wheel for me, Bolton Wanderers, which, I mean, there's some names in there, isn't there, Con?
So many names. I mean, immediately you just think of that era under Big Sam and the players that were coming in when they were in the Premier League and the football they were playing. And, huge list of names from Bolton.
There's a huge list of names, and it was really hard to pick which one I was going to go for. But I actually wanted to go a little bit different because all of our players have been outfielders. A lot of them have been strikers, midfielders, some even defenders. I wanted to go for our first goalkeeper on the podcast. So I could have gone with any goalkeeper, but I think you know who I'm going to say. And I say this name, look, he's a really good goalkeeper. And this is the problem with the League of the Questionable Quality. But you'll understand the narrative and where I'm going with the questionable quality because he is a good goalkeeper. Jussi Jaaskelainen.
I mean, to be honest, when you said goalkeeper and Bolton, the two that sprung to mind were Jussi Jaaskelainen or Ali Al-Habsi. And I wasn't sure which one you were going to go for, to be fair. But so Jussi Jaaskelainen, wow.
I've gone for the one that, you know, is an unbelievable player, an unbelievable goalkeeper. He played a lot of games. Yeah. His earlier days, it's not your rich and glamour story. It's not your, suddenly he was doing this and then he did this. He was actually wiring people's houses. So he was a Finnish electrician. And he then went from going to fixing people's wires to actually saving Thierry Henry's shot. So the fact that he's gone from that career to another career is just crazy.
A bit of a change, isn't it? Just a bit of a change.
A bit of a change, yeah. But obviously really handy with his hands. So it obviously went into a different, the same kind of career. He's born in Finland. So he's our first Finnish player to get, potentially into the LQQ. Look, I'm going to absolutely ruin these clubs' names because to say them, it's really hard. I was listening to a podcast earlier. How do you say the Swedish league name?
I like is it the Alice Kavassen?
Exactly. How do you say it?
I don't know. That's the best attempt I think I could give it. Yeah.
Exactly. So if someone can let us know in the comments, how do you say it? I know you'll literally type it out, but how do you actually say and pronounce that league? But anyway, he didn't play in that league, but he did play in the Finnish league and he played MP Mikkeli. He came through the ranks of, and he became first choice due to an injury to their senior keeper, which often happens for goalkeepers. When the number one gets injured, the second choice gets a chance to play. And he was actually playing semi-professionally in Finland. And he worked as an electrician alongside playing football as well. And he then moved to VPS Vasa between 1995 and 1997, where he established himself as one of Finland's better keepers. He said better keepers, not the best keeper, but one of their better ones. Who else has played at a high level from Finland?
Yeah, I'm not sure who else was around in Finland at the time that was better than him, but clearly there were some great goalkeepers there then.
He didn't come through in an English academy, but he did come through a foos box, which, is interesting. So he played for MP Mikkeli and he got 64 league appearances for them. They were regularly fighting relegation, so he had a lot of chances to save a lot of shots. He was known as reliable, but not particularly anything special. He then went to VPS Vasa, again made 54 league appearances, and he started to get Finnish international recognition. He was seen as functional rather than being an elite footballer. He then ends up joining Bolton. So he actually joins the Premier League. He was initially signed for 150,000 in 1997, which again, it's 1997. It's Bolton Wanderers. We've got to put that into context. We spoke about transfer fees before, but this player 150,000 is probably quite a lot for Bolton, but he was initially signed as a 4th or 5th choice keeper. He did really struggle with the English weather at the start. He did really struggle with the wet pitches, and he also struggled with the long kicking. He couldn't handle the weather. His kicking was absolutely erratic. So they said that we had to rebuild him as a goalkeeper. Add anything to that, or
just reading here that he originally went on trial with Norwich, and they wanted to sign him before he ended up going to Bolton.
To kind of get that
Paid the
English
money for him.
experience.
Yeah. So he went on trial there. I think Colin Todd, who was the manager at the time, persuaded him to join them. And he said about him at the time, he's one for the future. I saw him playing for the under-21s and he was very impressive. I followed it up immediately, but things got held up. When I got wind of him being on trial and possibly signing for another English club, I moved in quickly. You can't let people of his quality pass you by. So to have that said by the manager, but then end up being the 3rd or 4th choice, something's, not worked out there in his original, that first part of his time at the club.
Yeah, and obviously when you think about Finnish goalkeepers and the Finnish league, at that time, with it being a lot of semi-professional players looking to try and get that move across, he was, by the end of the 1997 season, after making his appearance for VPS Vasa, they finished in 2nd place. So obviously he was just a top goalkeeper for that level. And then obviously then goes on trial with Norwich and they look to try and sign him, but he ends up signing with Bolton. And he's actually then behind Keith Brannigan and Gavin Ward. So he is literally that 4th choice, 3rd choice goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So he then jumps in, and Bolton, his career is just staggering. In all competitions, he made 530 appearances. 530.
He was one of those players, didn't he, where he just seemed to go on forever. And it was pretty much a guarantee that he was going to be starting for Bolton in that time in the Premier League. I don't think whilst he was there, I don't think they signed a goalkeeper that was ever going to sort of come near him. No. Certainly, before he started to get on a little bit, they weren't going to sign anybody that was going to come in to replace him. He was the number one. He was the Mr. Consistent for them.
Yeah, early on in the 1999 season, he was actually dropped because of his bad performances. But he then soon picked that up again because obviously they realised that because he's competed with these 2 goalkeepers, eventually he would get that starting role when Brannigan actually got injured again. So when we think about Jussi Jaaskelainen, we think about him being in that Sam Allardyce side. And I know you've just recently watched the Sky Sports documentary on the Sam Allardyce era and how much you spoke about off air, how much you've loved that documentary. And was there much being said about him in that particular documentary?
To be fair, there wasn't actually an awful lot about him. He was mentioned and there were some clips of him. There was more really of the signings that Allardyce made in his time there and the players that he brought in, because obviously they went about things in a very different way, Bolton. They were one of the first clubs to really delve into the data analysis aspect of signing players. So obviously Jaaskelainen had come in before him, but as you say, was a very, very important part of the team that he built there and that ended up being actually quite successful. The top half finishes they had in the Premier League and some of the players that they had there, the likes of Nicolas Anelka and Ivan Campo, Fernando Hierro, JJ Okocha. They had some really, really top-class players that ended up playing for the club because of the way in which they went about the business.
Allardyce, when he had him, he was heaping on praise to him. He said the big man was outstanding with his commanding performance, who was most responsible for giving the back 4 confidence. And I think his incredibly tall frame, his incredibly probably calm and reassuring persona that he seems to have and justifying by his teammates, how he is able to be really effective. And he just made consistently a lot of appearances. In 2003-04, he was actually linked with replacing Peter Schmeichel at Manchester City, but he didn't end up going there. He ended up obviously staying and just being consistent. You think about him with that number 22 shirt, he's just a massive frame. A massive frame. He was a player that you wouldn't really replace. When you think about sides, when they have a consistent goalkeeper in there, they're not looking to change them all the time. And I think he was one of those stalwarts at that time. If you've got someone consistent who played consistently well, is a good shot stopper, can kick decently well in the end because he adapted to England. Yeah, I mean, they ended up, Sam Allardyce's Bolton. We spoke about this before, but top half finishes 4 seasons in a row, qualifying for the UEFA Cup twice, beating Bayern Munich in Europe. You know, he was a goalkeeper for Bolton's golden age, and he wasn't particularly someone that was shaky. He wasn't someone who was inconsistent. He was just regularly consistent for a Bolton Wanderers side that were pushing, top half Premier League football for 4 seasons in a row.
And you look at where Bolton are as a club now, struggling really to get out of League One, not making that step up to the Championship yet. And obviously the fans still have that belief that they're a big club. They've got the big ground and they have got, a large fan base. They believe they should be playing at a higher level because of the likes of Jussi Jaaskelainen and the other players in that team at that time that made them believe that they were a club that deserved to be there. They weren't there by luck. It was hard work and it was sheer talent. It was such a talented squad, but they were held together by having him in goal.
Actually, one of the managers that made some of the most biggest signings in that era of football, Arsene Wenger said about admiring his consistency and his shot stopping. And I think he was actually linked with Arsenal during that period of time because we were lacking especially after Jens Lehmann, we were lacking with the goalkeeper. And someone being with that massive commanding tall frame, we needed someone to match that. And UC was someone that they were looking at to try and sign, because one of his iconic moments was actually against Arsenal, where he made 14 saves in one game. It's one of the best individual goalkeeping displays by a modern goalkeeper. But his weakness is obviously his distribution was poor by modern standards. Like, you think about him playing now, he probably wouldn't be playing in the Premier League now because of his distribution is probably not good enough.
Yeah, he wasn't one of those players that was going to help you necessarily build from the back. He was what really I think a goalkeeper should be, and that's somebody who stops the ball from going into your net.
And he was brilliant at that.
And whilst football has changed and is now so much more about retaining possession, building from the back, actually, your goalkeeper, you just want him to do the bog standard. Stop that ball going in your net. Be that strong and secure unit for your back line. So if your back line does get breached, you can rely on that goalkeeper to make a save.
He was really disappointed that the fact that he never actually won anything for Bolton. Because that era of the club is considered their best of the modern era. He was named in 2006, he was named in the club's greatest starting 11 for the modern era. And he then went after Bolton, he left and he joined West Ham. And he was actually reunited with Sam Allardyce, who he'd worked under for 8 years at Bolton. And he was given again the number 22 shirt, like he wore it his entire time there. And he made a lot of appearances for them. He was up for Player of the Month awards. He was awarded the Player of the Month awards. He became runner-up in the Hammer of the Year of the 2012-13 season. We've already spoken about how successful West Ham were during Sam Allardyce's era with Matt Jarvis in the other podcasts that we've done. And when you think about him, Jaaskelainen, you think about him playing for Bolton. You don't necessarily think about, actually, he was consistent for West Ham as well under Sam Allardyce.
Yeah, no, I forget that he played at West Ham, to be fair, because he is just so synonymous with that Bolton side and playing there that you do forget that he did go to West Ham and followed Allardyce there. But again, shows how much trust and how much faith Allardyce had in him, was to bring him there with him again and make him first choice.
So for West Ham, he had that one season when they were doing really well and he played 38 games for them. The next season after that, he lessened his amount of games. But we're talking, he's knocking on here like he's getting older. Bless him. He's not getting any younger. He then actually leaves West Ham and he drops down to League One to go and play consistently. And he plays in League One 35 times and they get promoted and they go up into the Championship then. He didn't play as much that season. They were looking to do different things. And then he ends up finishing his career at ATK in the Indian Super League. But, we're talking finish number 1 for years. Not a time when they're doing anything really, but just, really good.
Well, he was second choice, wasn't he, behind Antti Niemi, who was obviously had a famous spell at Fulham and that very famous, was it TalkSport interaction where they
He's
said,
not finished.
He's not finished. He is finished.
That was hilarious, that was.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, he retired, though, Antti Niemi, in 2005, and he'd have only been, 33 at that time. But you think for a goalkeeper to have retired from international football at 33 is probably quite early. And that's then when Jaaskelainen came in as the Finnish number one.
That's when he took over that. So even like in his earlier days, he's playing for the Premier League sides, he's playing top end of the Championship, but obviously Anthony Niemi is obviously someone who they trusted more. He then went and became a coach, so a goalkeeping coach, actually under Sam Ricketts at Wrexham.
Yes.
Yeah. He then, he's been at like place like Barrow. Is that right?
I know Graham Barrow was there with him.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So he just stuck around at Wrexham, and then most recently he's been the goalkeeper coach of a Finnish club, PK35, who are competing in the second tier. Strange, just a strange end, because it feels like he could have become maybe a top coach or...
Well, I think when he was at Wrexham, I'm sure his son was playing there at the time. His son is a goalkeeper as well.
Will.
Yeah, I think he was at Wrexham as well. And interesting, when he was working with Sam Ricketts, obviously Ricketts got the job in the summer and by the November was poached by Shrewsbury. He was taken very quickly because Wrexham had started well. So there was talk for some time that Jussi Jaaskelainen might have been coming into Shrewsbury as the goalkeeping coach. But like you say, he actually worked there alongside the caretaker team and took caretaker charge of their FA Cup match against Newport. When there were rumours that Ricketts was going to go, they told him to stay away and put him in caretaker charge with the other coaches, but then left the club then in the summer afterwards.
So it seems like all of his sons, all three of them, that were born in England, so they have the eligibility to play for England and for Finland as well. So Will Jaaskelainen, I remember watching him a few times because did he play for Crewe? He did. Yeah, he played for Crewe.
Yeah.
And I remember him playing down at Crewe. He's currently playing for Woking. His second son, Emil, is currently playing. He's currently playing for Sporting Club Jacksonville. He was on the books at Blackpool for a little while, but he's kind of just bounced around in America and played for FC Motown as well. What a name that is.
Wow, that's a
FC
name.
Motown. And his other youngest son, Robin, currently plays in the college system in the United States. So not only has he made it to a top professional, but these other sons that he's got have played a decent level of football as well. But let's just go back to why he should be in the LQQ. My reasonings are a good, solid Premier League goalkeeper, yes, but never played for a massive Big Six traditional club. His reputation was inflated by the amount of saves that he made and the fact that we think about him in that Bolton nostalgic team, where the uncomfortable truth is he was often excellent because Bolton needed him to be, because of their side and where they sat, and he was rarely elite in his position. He wasn't the big name that you're thinking about, but when you're thinking about consistently playing every week, he was a consistent Premier League player.
Yeah, he's one of those goalkeepers. He's a solid choice. He never, like you say, never broke into that sort of top club mould. And whether that's because top clubs didn't fancy him, but like you say, there were links with Man City at the end of the 03-04 season. I think 2006, there were some links with Man United that he distanced himself from. So was it that those clubs didn't want him, or did he maybe not want the move, that maybe he was happy where he was, to spend so long at Bolton? But like you say, consistency is so key. I'm looking at his time at Bolton in the Premier League, and year by year, 34 appearances and 38, 38, 36, 38, 38, 28, 38, 38, 35, before he then did 18 in his last year with them. So he's predominantly playing every single game for them, is always available, and is always, reliable for the club.
And I think that's why I'm putting him forward for the LQQ, because he's remembered more for how long he played for rather than how well he played.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he played bad, but I'm just saying you more remember him for the longevity, the consistency, the ability to perform consistently for Bolton, predominantly, play to an old age as well, rather than his actual quality. So would you say that he's overrated? Or would you say that he's rated? Or would you say he's underrated?
I would say he's probably rated. I think he was a good goalkeeper in a good side at that time, and he was the goalkeeper that Bolton needed within that period of them being in the Premier League. I think he was probably in the right place at the right time. Because we've spoke about players, we spoke previously about players like Afonso Alves, who it just seemed like it was the wrong club for him at the wrong time.
Absolutely.
And he wasn't suited to it. But Jussi Jaaskelainen at Bolton there, I imagine at the time there would have been huge doubts about him when he first signed. Bringing somebody in from the Finnish league, a part-time footballer who's also a sparky, massive doubt. If that happened now,
absolutely.
If you think of a club sort of doing a Bolton to me, you think someone like, I don't know, Crystal Palace in the Premier League bringing in a goalkeeper for 100 grand. from Finland who's
You're
part
not doing it,
time,
are you?
and within a year or two ends up being your first choice goalkeeper.
For 13 years?
Yeah. There'd be huge questions asked about it. So I imagine there probably were at the time. And I think he proved them all wrong, but maybe didn't go as far as making them think, oh, wow, yeah, he's world class. He wasn't world class. He was a good goalkeeper in a good club at a good time for both him and that club, I think.
And that's why I think it's a bit controversial bringing him up in this conversation, but I think he deserves the airtime to be spoken about in the way that we've spoken about him. So
Yeah.
Bolton was my club that I got, and UC Jaaskelainen is the one that I've put forward. So Connor, I'm going to come to you now. You got on the wheel who?
I got Derby County.
Oh my God, you could pick some absolute shockers.
Well, I mean, I looked at that 2007-2008 squad who got the 11 points, the 1 win and the 8 draws.
One win.
Yeah.
1 win.
And honestly, I could have sat here forever and ever with the players in there. There were players that I was very tempted to pick, but I thought I don't think anybody else would ever have heard of them, because there were some really, really rogue names in that squad at the time. Then you had some of your bigger names. Obviously, Robbie Savage was the captain. So a couple of
I'd have loved you to
well-known
pick him
names.
because he is the biggest, honestly.
Yeah, I just didn't want to give him really any more airtime than necessary, because I think he likes to get that himself.
Let's move on.
Yeah. So I've picked a striker, and I've picked a striker
Again.
again.
Mate, you need to stop picking these strikers, honestly.
I know, but
shall we recap some of the people that you've chosen, right? So you've chosen a midfielder, you've chosen a defender, right? It's quite balanced. Then you picked a striker, and everyone's going, all right, yeah. And you picked someone who was actually, rated. I mean, bloody hell, he's rated. Darren Bent.
Oh, yeah.
Rated, right? Then you've gone back to, I'm going to go back to Jonathan Woodgate, centre half. Then you've gone, striker, Alfonso Alves. Really good coming to the Premier League, not very good when he's actually here. Victor Anichebe, the fridge. So we're talking now another striker. You literally, and let's just put it right, none of your strikers have got in the LQQ. Is this what you're trying to do? Just get one of your strikers in the LQQ?
I just want one to get in there, and I'm really hopeful that this one will. I really am, particularly because of how dreadful that side was. So this is a striker who could score in every competition except the Premier League when he joined Derby. Okay. He was the ultimate poacher who was dropped into the ultimate creativity-free zone with that Derby team. He's a man who needed chances like they were oxygen, and Derby gave him a snorkel on land. He is Robert Earnshaw.
Robert
Earnshaw, who is a championship legend.
He's been about, hasn't he? He's been about.
Got trapped in a Premier League nightmare. He really, really did. Now, he is a very, very unique player. And a little bit like the Grant Hanley conversation we had a few episodes ago, if we were talking about the greatest EFL players of all time, absolutely 100% Rob Earnshaw, he's got to be in your top 3, maybe your top 5. He has to be in there. We talk about his time in the Premier League, and wow, absolutely horrific, essentially.
Good for like a good EFL player, as you're saying.
Yeah.
But just Premier League, just not there.
No, didn't end up being able to cut it. So
he's had a couple of seasons in the Prem, to be fair.
Yeah. He spent more time in the Premier League than I actually thought he had, to be fair, but never really delivered on both accounts. But I think there's maybe reasons for that. So he was born in Zambia, but then was raised in South Wales.
Because obviously he played for Wales, didn't he?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he played a lot for Wales. I didn't realise he was Zambian. Didn't realise that.
Yeah, so born there but raised in Wales, and he joined Cardiff as part of a youth training scheme trainee in 1997 and turned professional then a year later. And I mean, his Cardiff record, wow, was there from 97 to 2004, made 205 appearances for the club, scoring 105 goals. Quite impressive numbers.
Before you go on to that, right, I wanted to go down the Zambian route.
Yeah.
Who are the 6 Zambian players to feature in the Premier League? We're not that TIFO podcast, by the way, that go, ooh, please name for me a country.
The top 5 players to play from that country in the Premier League. Oh.
Zambia. Who?
I wouldn't even know where to start, but I'm sure there's some that have probably just gone or played recently in like either AFCON or in like AFCON qualifiers.
So he's not on this list, right? Because he didn't actually represent Zambia.
Yeah.
But he's from Zambia, so we're going to take that as he's a Zambian player.
Is there the lad at Sunderland currently? If Sunderland got a Zambian, is Reinildo? He's not Zambian, is he? Is it?
No,
Oh no,
he's Mozambican. Oh, that'd be even more of
yeah,
an obscure list.
that'd be so extreme,
So you've
so
got
extreme.
Mwepu, played for Brighton.
Yes, is he the guy that had to retire early due to a heart issue?
Oh, did he?
I think
He was
so.
like a relentless pressing midfielder, wasn't he? He's like bloody everywhere.
Yeah.
Patson Daka,
Yeah, of course.
who's still playing, obviously. Charlie Masonda Jr.
Who was at Chelsea?
Yeah.
Him and his brother, Tika.
Massive, he was a FIFA legend then, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He needed someone with 90 potential. It was him.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Mayuka, played for Southampton.
Yeah, I thought he was there.
Collins Wasuma, played for Portsmouth. And Neil Gregory, played for Ipswich.
Neil Gregory. Wow.
Exactly. The first
That is-
Zambian player to play in the Premier League was Freddie Muwala and Emmett Kapanagwu, who were signed by Aston Villa in 1969. There you go.
Wow.
There you go. That's mad, isn't it? That was the first
Yeah,
Zambian to play in England. That was them two players.
I honestly didn't realise that many Zambians had played.
No. Neil Gregory, Collins Mbasuma, Mayuka, Daka and Mwepu. Crazy.
That is quite something.
That is quite something, isn't it? Anyway, back to Robert Earnshaw, because he's Welsh.
He is. Yeah, Cardiff, 97 to 2004, 205 appearances, 105 goals. Became a real top player for them, really well loved by the supporters. 31 league goals in the 2002-2003 season for Cardiff, which was a phenomenal number. And the local press used to call him a pocket rocket with a striker's instinct that you can't teach. So he had a very, very good spell at Cardiff, as I say, really, really well loved by supporters. There was the tension that then was attracted. Celtic were apparently in for him. Fulham, Charlton, Aston Villa were all interested in him at one point as well.
All the Midlands clubs, yeah.
Yeah, and then he ended up getting a move to West Brom. So £3 million he was bought for, which could have risen to £3.62 million with some add-ons that were put into it. But his agent was actually fined 30,000 Swiss francs by FIFA because of his role in the transfer. He was found guilty of acting for both his client and the buying club within the deal. So I assume he was maybe trying to take money from both as part of the deal and was...
Good. I hate West Brom. Take as much money from them as possible. I don't know what it is about him, mate. I just absolutely hate him. I always have. Don't know what it is about him. The boing
I
boing.
can't see them. Well, I can't see them bouncing back up anytime soon. If they're going anywhere, they're going into League One.
I bloody hope so.
They're in a real mess at the minute, a real mess. Another former Shrewsbury man in charge there as well, Eric Ramsey. He was a coach at Shrewsbury for a while. Highly rated as well, very highly rated. Moved on to West Brom. And made his West Brom debut in a 3-0 defeat at Liverpool in September 2004. Wasn't really a very prolific spell that he had at West Brom. 59 appearances for the club in all competitions, 17 goals. Now, when he signed for them that 2004-2005 season, that was the year of the Great Escape, when they were bottom of the league at Christmas and Brian Robson managed to keep them up. And he did score some crucial goals in that survival run-in. He was quite an important player for them, but was just unable really to back that up with the goals that he scored. But again, it's a team that was struggling at the time, so you're not expecting to create lots of chances. I think the one thing he's remembered for most at West Brom was probably a game at Charlton where the score was tied at 1-1 in the 64th minute when Rob Earnshaw came on, and he then went on to score a hat-trick. He scored in the 73rd minute, the 84th and the 90th minute, and they won the game 4-1 at the Valley. So came on and within half an hour bagged them a hat-trick that was crucial in earning some points to keep them up that season. Brian Robson
scored goals then at that level.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think in total in the Premier League for them, I think he got 12. 17
12,
in all comps, but 12 in the Premier League. So I think it was maybe a case of didn't score lots, but scored important goals. The goals he scored had value and did mean something. Remained in the squad in the next year, again in the Premier League, but West Brom had signed some other players that time, Diamanti Kamara, Nathan Ellington as well. Both of those didn't really go on to have fantastic careers either. And he did then, sort of the midpoint of that season, submit some transfer requests. Both got rejected, but was then told by Brian Robson he could go if there was a fair transfer fee that was on offer. And that eventually did come, because on deadline day in January 2006, he signed a 3.5-year deal at Norwich for 2.75 million, which rose to 3.5 million. And he was the replacement for Dean Ashton, who had left Norwich at that time to sign, I think, for West Ham.
Top striker. Top striker.
Yeah, another one that injuries, I think, really,
Yeah.
had a huge
Yeah.
impact on his career. If he'd have stayed fit, absolutely, I think would have been somebody that England would have been probably calling up and relying on,
Yeah.
should
Yeah,
he
he
have
had a
stayed fit.
massive potential, didn't he?
Yeah, huge, really highly rated. So yeah, he went to Norwich then. In total, 45 appearances for them, 27 goals. So one of the most prolific spells of his career there, up there with the numbers, not quite the numbers he was getting at Cardiff, but in terms of the numbers he was maybe getting in a spell like that, a good, really, good return. 27 in 45 made him a fan favourite very quickly, and Norwich fans described him as a goal with legs. He was guaranteed to cause problems for defenders in the Championship and score goals for Norwich, and that earned him then his move to Derby upon their promotion to the Premier League in 2007. 3.5 million, so Norwich got back what they'd paid for him. And across that season in the Premier League, he made 22 appearances for Derby, scoring on just one occasion.
Which
His first,
did they sign him because of his previous Premier League experience with West Brom then? Do you think that's why they signed him?
yeah, I think so. I think the goals he'd scored at Norwich, I think they thought probably they could have replicated again. But I also think, yeah, that spell at West Brom where he scored crucial goals to help keep them up, I think they probably thought, look, we're getting a striker here who causes issues. He's quick. You give him a chance and he will score more often than not. The unfortunate thing was that Derby side did not create the chances for him, and he never actually started very regularly for them. He made 22 appearances in total. I think 7 of those were starts and 15 were from the bench.
I'm just looking at their ins and outs, so Derby's ins and outs for that season. And they ended up bringing Kenny Miller in as well from Celtic
Yes.
for 2.5 million. So he'd have been competing with him to be the starting spot or the top two. And Kenny Miller was the top goal scorer of that season for them with 4 goals.
Yeah.
And a player, we're just going to sidetrack a little bit. A player got released, if we were doing an EFL podcast or a Shrewsbury Town one, in May 2007, Lyle Ainsworth. What a player.
Rapid.
Mate, what a player.
When Shrewsbury Town played with quick wingers. Oh, what a time.
Yeah.
What a time. So yeah, his time at Derby was very, very difficult. The only goal he scored was in a 6-2 defeat against Arsenal. And it was a goal that absolutely you'd expect Rob Earnshaw to score. He's running on towards the back line. He gets the pass played into him, takes the touch to open it out, and with his right foot, strokes it nicely around the goalkeeper. And I think at that point, that made the game 3-2. So Derby were in the game when he scored that goal, but obviously went on to lose 6-2, but really struggled for service, struggled for confidence, struggled for minutes. Like I say, 7 starts within that season and then 15 appearances from the bench for the club. So he was in a very poor team, and Derby fans were sympathetic with him. They didn't see him as a terrible player because they knew of his record elsewhere. Most of them weren't fans of the system that Derby were playing at that time. He was bought to the club by Billy Davis, but he was sacked midway through and replaced by Paul Jewell. So I think that the change in
Classic
manager.
Premier League manager.
Oh yeah,
Paul
I think
Jewell.
the change in manager potentially maybe had a bit of an impact on his confidence because maybe he wasn't quite fancied by Paul Jewell, and so then got to the final game of that dreadful season, and they'd accepted a bid then from 2 clubs, which were Nottingham Forest and Sheffield United. And he then went on to play and sign for Nottingham Forest, 2.65 million. So not quite recouping what they
He's just
paid for him.
consistently going for the same kind of money, isn't he?
Yeah.
All the time.
Between 2.5, 3.5 million, you'll get Rob Earnshaw. 105 appearances at Forest, 35 goals. So he rebuilt his reputation again, became a more reliable Championship scorer again, got his confidence back. And that really was his last sort of good spell. He ended up going back to Cardiff for a short while and got 3 in 19, and then had to have some really strange career moves. He had a loan spell at Maccabi Tel Aviv where he scored 2 in 10. Yeah.
Wow, he went there. I didn't know that.
He went back to Cardiff, went down the pecking order then at Cardiff and joined Maccabi Tel Aviv, and was delighted because he had the chance to work with the club's sporting director, who at that time was Jordi Cruyff.
Jordi Cruyff. Wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that.
So then he went back to Cardiff. Malky Mackay, the manager, then said he was
Oh
surplus
my
to
God.
requirements, and so he
Malky
left the club
Mackay.
and he joined Toronto over in the MLS.
How?
8 goals in 26 for Toronto, so he got a couple of goals again there. Then had a very short spell at Blackpool. He joined in March 2014 on a deal till the end of the season. He made a single appearance for the club and then got released at the end of his contract. Then he went back to the MLS. He went to Chicago Fire and played there for a short while. 3 goals in 5 appearances for Chicago Fire. Then he went off to Vancouver Whitecaps and had a spell there.
That's
and then
mad.
retired.
He's an MLS legend.
Yeah.
No way.
And then retired in 2016. You know, a fairly decent international career for Wales. He managed to play a fair few times for them and score some goals, 59 times for the senior squad, 16 goals within that time. He did captain the side on a few occasions as well, captain them against Scotland at the Nations Cup.
Yeah, I remember him playing for Wales a lot. I remember him playing a lot.
Yeah,
But
so
you
yeah,
go,
and he's
you go back to
gone
that
on-
championship stuff you were talking about before. The numbers in the championship are decent.
Yeah, very decent.
19
very
and
decent.
19 and 30 games for Norwich when he played there in the one season. You know, for Forest, 12 and 32, 17 and 34 for Forest in the championship.
Yeah.
You know, didn't kick
And
off again when it went back to Cardiff, but
No, and even at Cardiff in that first spell in the third division, 19 in 36, into the second division, 12 in 32, then 31 in 46, 21 in 46. So, you know, at that level, he was a goal scorer and a consistent and a reliable goal scorer. But in the Premier League with West Brom, like I say, 12 goals in 43 appearances there. You know, not a terrible return, but certainly you would maybe expect a little bit more from a goal scorer of his pedigree at that time. And then 1 in 22 for Derby, which in total gives him, 13 goals in 55 Premier League appearances. And you would think a striker who scored that many goals in the Championship would maybe be able to score a few more in the Premier League.
some are just that level, aren't they?
Yeah.
Some of them, that's what they do. That's what they play like. And
going back to what we mentioned about Grant Hanley from a previous episode, you know, fantastic player at that level is absolutely what you'd want in a player and would do the job at that level, but makes that step up and just doesn't get that consistency.
Have you read about his hat-trick record?
Yes, he is the one of the very few players or I think maybe the only player to have scored a hat-trick in the Premier League, all 3 divisions of the EFL, the League Cup, the FA Cup, and an international match.
That's mad, isn't it?
Which proves the goal scorer he was and the goal scoring potential he had. But he just, you know, he became a symbol of how badly that Derby team was set up. You know, he was your typical poacher. He would be in the right place at the right time, but the right time never came because it wasn't being provided to him.
I just think, you know, like a steady striker for championship level, you know, decent numbers, good returns, got to the Premier League, and it just didn't kick off for him. He did okay at West Brom, you know, okay, but, you know, Derby was a massive flop. And that can really affect your career. But then he goes to Forest, plays in the Championship, scores 38 in 102 for Forest. You know, that's a good return. But you have to question Premier League quality.
Yeah, and like I say, they were teams that were struggling at that time. West Brom, you know, in that 04-05 season really were in the mud, and the goals that he scored were important but weren't prolific. And then at Derby as well, you know, 1 in 22 is a really poor return, but
it's a really
poor very, very poor side at that time.
It's hard, isn't it? Because you've got players who are good at the lower level. And no matter who you are, when you come into the Premier League, you need to come in with confidence. He's coming with confidence. You need to also be in a team that provides for you. And as a striker, if they're not feeding you in the positions that you want it, you're not getting the ball where you want it. So many strikers come and go. Alphonso Alves. You know, if I said to you at the time, okay, Derby, you can either sign Alphonso Alves, who's scoring goals at Eredivisie, the ridiculous amount of level of goals. I can't remember the exact stats, Con, but
I think
Alphonso,
it was 45 and 39, I think it was.
Right, so if you're saying, as Derby coming up, are we going to sign him or Robert Earnshaw? Previous Premier League experience, score goals. You know, if you're scoring 10 goals in the Premier League for a struggling side, you know what, actually, you're all right. You're not bad. Because chances are few and far between. Then you go to Derby, and obviously they get 1 in 22 for himself, but Championship level player, and then just literally does an American tour. And Yeah, ends up Maccabi Tel Aviv. That's crazy. What a journey.
Yeah. I
What a
mean, you
journey.
know, he's seen absolutely as your typical journeyman striker, but one that clubs, particularly if you were a club that wanted to get promotion or wanted to be at the top end of the Championship, you'd go out and you'd pay £3 million for Rob Earnshaw and you'd get a return on that.
Absolutely. And I think for an EFL, questionable quality. For the Premier League, I think absolutely. Championship level, not questionable quality at all.
Yeah, definitely.
So that leaves us then with only us two being on here. Who's going in? Is it Jussi Jaaskelainen, who was a longevity, consistency every single week for Bolton and for a little bit for West Ham? Or is it Rob Earnshaw, who questionable quality in the Premier League?
I think it might be time for me to get a striker in the LQQ.
I think it's time for you to get a striker in the
I
LQQ.
think it's time. So I feel like I can sleep well tonight now, and I can move on to a different position to try and I've got to go for a defender now. I've had a couple of defenders that I haven't got in.
You're going to go back there.
So I maybe got to go back to a defender now. But I think, like you say, Jussi Jaaskelainen's consistency and reliability over the long period of time that he played in the Premier League means that, maybe his quality wasn't as questionable as Rob Earnshaw's record is in the Premier League.
No, completely. So I agree. So it goes without saying that Robert Earnshaw, born in Zambia, played for Wales and represented Wales at an extremely high level, a championship level striker, tried and dabbled in struggling Premier League sides, still scored goals, but struggled in the Premier League, has made it into the LQQ. Not questionable in terms of his championship level ability, but questionable quality in terms of his Premier League ability. And a big shout out to Jussi Jaaskelainen, who just a consistently good player for Bolton. So that leads us on to the next episode. So Con, can you spin the wheel for Adam, please, for the next one?
Indeed, I can. So Adam will end up with Wigan Athletic.
Wigan. There are some players in there.
There are some absolute stonkers in that Wigan side.
All right. Do you want to spin it for Jack?
Yeah. So Jack. Okay. Jack's got Brighton.
Brighton for the next one. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's got Brighton. Again, some up and down ones there because recently they just seem to be wheeling them out. But in the past, they've had some real dodgy players.
Well, there'll be some absolute stonkers from that first year they got promoted. There'll be some real
absolutely
interesting ones there.
All right, then. So do you want to spin it for yourself?
Yeah. So I have got, I've pulled out Manchester City.
Man City.
And I'm thinking straight back to like Stuart Pearce and Sven-Goran Eriksson era and some of the players that were in those sides there.
You've got a lot to choose from in there. So City will make an appearance in the 8th episode of...
Yes.
How do they play? So the 8th episode. For me then.
For you.
What hand are you drawing me?
Cardiff City.
Straight away, my brain, it goes straight away to Neil Warnock.
Oh, yeah.
And the potential players that I could have in there. So, to recap for next episode, we've got Adam going with Wigan, Connor going with City, me with Cardiff, and Jack with Brighton. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening. And hopefully you join us for the next episode to find out who goes into the LQ.